Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 14 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. My favorite two stories this time I would say one involves snow and the other involves batteries. Let's get to it. Case file number 3274, written by Artistic Anxiety, The Curious Journey of a Loaf. So yesterday, I went to the store to get groceries and picked up a loaf of bread. When I got home, I specifically remember taking it out of the bag and opening the fridge and seeing that I already had a loaf that I had forgotten. I shrugged and put the second loaf next to the first one. Like an hour later, I went to make a sandwich and I remember thinking, I have so much bread, I should eat it before both loaves go bad. So I opened the fridge and the second loaf was gone? Only one loaf in there. I was confused and dug through the entire fridge. It just wasn't there. I checked the counters and the pantry, trash in the freezer, to see if I had set it down and forgot to actually put it in the fridge somehow. It's just gone. I live alone and I have a security camera. I don't think anyone would break in without triggering the camera just to steal a loaf of bread and leave. I'm so fucking confused. Where did my bread go? Later on, I found it in my trunk, which still doesn't make any sense because I had it in my hand and emptied the entire trunk. But I mean, at least I have my bread now, I guess. What the fluck? I don't think this could be an instance of memory lapse or anything like that because you brought the loaf inside and put it in the fridge. Could you just invent that memory in your mind? Well, we can sometimes create memories in our mind, but usually it involves either some extreme situation, it's a psychological defense mechanism, or it's a very distant memory. In this case, nothing traumatic happened and it's not a distant memory. So, was it fabricated by your mind? I don't think so. I think this is a case of the universe not indexing properly. So an item was in a certain place and it simply was restored to a different spot earlier because probably the data file of that loaf was corrupted. I think this also explains why sometimes objects reset in time. It's simply that they're pulling from a saved memory file of that object. Case file number 3275, written by General Lillis. Batteries not included. Well, I was about 8 years old, and I had always been scared of my room because my mother had these creepy ceramic clowns in it. So there were 3 or 4 around the room that looked like the clown from Stephen King's horror movie, It, and I say this ceramic figure looked even creepier. Every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I felt so scared because of these horrible clowns. You know that feeling when you think there is something around you, moving, looking at you? It's almost like you can hear that feeling. This sensation is very similar to when you turn on a TV. I've always thought that weird sensation is because of the TV static, but one night in particular, I woke up and felt that peculiar sensation for a few minutes before opening my eyes to the darkness in my room. I tried to go back to sleep, but my mind was so active I just couldn't. So I did what any kid my age would do in a situation like that. I started calling my folks in a really low voice. In my mind, I didn't want to draw the attention of whatever I felt around me. After many attempts, before recurring to screaming from the top of my lungs for mom and dad, I said to myself, every night I wake up feeling like this and nothing happens. Nothing is going to happen to me tonight. And that's when I heard it. I perceived a strange but very recognizable noise that was coming from the living room. It was the sound of an electric motor. After a few seconds, I realized what I'd heard was my RC car moving around the living room. The thing is, I could not only hear it, but after figuring out what it was, I saw it. I could see it because the end of the hallway that came from the living room was my door, and behind my door was my bed, which was right beside my 3-year-old brother's bed. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. The only thing though possible was that my dad was playing with the RC at 3 a.m. Having that in mind, I grew some balls, got out of bed, and walked haltingly directly to my room's door. When I'm almost halfway, the RC car stopped suddenly. It brakes like it felt I was looking at him. All the while I stood motionless in the hallway. At the end of the hallway, on the left, there was a door that went to the garage, and to the right, there was a kitchen entrance. The kitchen had a bar that connected to the living room, so one could see through the kitchen entrance and through that same bar across the living room sofa. And that is when I realized my dad was not there, and the balls I've built shrunk again in a matter of a second. As if possessed, the RC starts moving again and goes directly to the garage door and starts to bang the garage door of the end of the hallway, crashing into it, every time bouncing back. The machine had gone berserk, I thought. But no, it wasn't out of control. It looked like the RC wanted to go outside. He knew exactly what he was doing. I suppose I was hallucinating, but my eyes proved me wrong. I turned around and ran inside my room, shut the door, turned on the light, and woke up my little brother. He started to cry, and finally my folks came in. Once I felt secure again, I fell asleep while they calmed my little brother, clueless of what had woken him up. The next day, I checked the RC car, and while at it, I tried to make some reasoning about why the car was moving by itself. I remembered that I had moved the other RCs with my controller, so maybe that was a possible answer for that strange incident. Maybe somebody was playing with his RC. Yes, at 3 in the morning, there was some random person playing outside my house with his RC, and his controller signal crossed with my RC, I innocently thought. So that's when I lifted my RC car, turned it around, and said to myself, never again, only to acknowledge that my RC car didn't have the batteries in it. Okay, this story is great, mainly for the ending. The twist, you could say, although not totally unpredictable. I just think it's so cool and creepy, of course, that, yeah, this toy, like you said, you postulated the only mundane explanation that someone else's signal was interfering and being intercepted by your toy, your RC toy, and was being commanded by that because someone else was playing with theirs early in the morning. Not inconceivable, maybe from a nearby house or something. But no, if there's no battery in your toy, that's impossible. So, was it a spirit inducing the current? That'd be my guess. Case file number 3276, written by Razel222, The Sink of No Return. For some context, I live in a student accommodation with a sink in my bedroom. It's directly next to my bed. Like, if I sat at the end of my bed, I could wash my hands or brush my teeth, which I don't. There's nothing much going on there besides my sink and my bed. When I'm not using it, I use the sink to store small things that I'm too lazy to put away directly. So like if I'm in bed and I eat candy, I'll toss the wrapper in there for when I actually get up, and then I'll throw it away. Anyway, recently, I put my portable fan there, but instead of putting it in the sink like I usually do, I kind of just balanced it on the edge of it. I forgot about it, and then accidentally kicked it. I heard it fell down on the floor. Immediately I got up to look for it, and it was literally gone. Remember, this is a fan. I looked everywhere. Behind the sink, under my bed, I've moved the furniture, but it's gone. I had to admit defeat and just shrugged it off, but yesterday, the same thing happened with an eraser. I placed it on the edge, forgot about it, and it fell down when I was doing whatever. I looked for it the same, changed my sheets, moved my bed. It's just gone. I really don't get it. Like, where the hell can it be? It's a small bedroom. Besides the bed and the sink, there's really not much. The eraser I can kind of understand misplacing, but a whole fucking fan? Case file number 3277, written by Bubblebutt Unicorn. A slideshow before dawn. I like to start this by saying I'm not sure if this is truly a glitch in the Matrix type of experience, but I also don't quite know what category this would fit in. What I do know for certain is ever since this happened, 24 years ago now, I can't help but question my reality. So here it goes. When I was 17, I went to an outdoor party with some friends in the countryside. I had had a lot to drink and started feeling sick, so I walked away from the main party area to possibly throw up and ended up laying down in a field of tall grass. The grass came up to my waist, I believe, and I'm also only 5 feet tall. I was wearing all black with my hood up, so I was basically invisible in the dark. I didn't lay down flat on my back as I was feeling too nauseous to do that. I laid on my side and slightly curled up. I may have passed out from being so intoxicated, That part I can't quite remember. At some point, I was just lying there. A car backed up over me. I remember rolling and then looking up at the underside of a vehicle. I remember I was just about to yell, but just as I was going to do that, it rolled forward and went over me a second time. Everything went black for a few seconds. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear my friends yelling. When my vision came back, I was being helped up. Aside from a black eye and tire marks across my shirt, I was completely fine. My friends quickly called for a cab, and I went to my girlfriend's place where I was supposed to be spending the night. When I got to her place, I went to have a bath to clean up and also calm down, as I was still freaking out and crying over the whole ordeal. I remember after taking my black hoodie off, just staring at the tire mark that went across the chest. As I laid in the tub, I just kept replaying everything that had happened over and over again in my head, and how nothing felt real. After my bath, I decided to call my dad, whom I was living with as my parents were separated, and tell him what happened so that he could take me to the hospital to check for any internal injuries. He did, and I was completely fine. No broken bones or any internal injuries of any kind. The doctor said the reason I survived was because the ground was soft and it just pushed me into it instead of crushing me. Unfortunately, my dad didn't believe I was run over by a car and thought I had simply just gotten into a fight. I told him if that were the case, I wouldn't have bothered calling him at 5 a.m. to take me to the damn hospital and would have just gone home after getting some sleep and showed him the black eye when I got there. I was actually kind of hurt that he didn't believe me, but I guess I can see how it was so unbelievable. I mean, getting run over by a car twice and having no injuries does seem pretty unbelievable. I later learned that the driver was devastated and punched out his own car window after realizing what had happened. I don't remember much between the car going forward and waking up under it, only that for a brief moment I saw flashes of my entire life like a slideshow of still images rushing by. It was the strangest, most vivid thing I've ever experienced. I've always wondered if something else was happening at that moment, if maybe I really did die for a second, or if my consciousness glitched somehow. It is the most surreal and unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this, where physics and logic say you shouldn't have survived, but you did? Also, no drugs involved other than alcohol, and as I said, I was checked at the hospital, totally fine. Still blows my mind to this day. Okay, this one's making me think. So, we all know about, well, most of us know about quantum immortality. It's a accepted, in my mind anyways, feature of the multiverse. So you die, you go to a different universe, your soul. Cool. Very simple. In this case, though, you still have to ponder on the idea that you are being transported to a different universe where most things are similar. And in this case, if it was survivable because you still had the print on your shirt, that means in the other universe, if this is quantum immortality, a car really did crush you effectively. And maybe, like the doctor said, the ground beneath you was soft enough where it didn't break anything. But the weight of a car is so immense, even if you were laying on a feather bed, or like just, a memory foam mattress, the space foam, I think it would still leave an impact. It would break a few ribs or something at least. Now, that's just my instinct. I don't know for sure. I wonder if Mythbusters tested this or something. They'd have to get them on the job. I'm just thinking, okay, maybe this is quantum immortality. You're in a different universe. But then physics still apply there, so you still survive something miraculously with no injury. That's just, really cool. I mean, the human body, even if we're just talking about the mundane, is pretty resilient, or it can be. It's weird. The human body can be so fragile and so resilient at the same time. Makes you wonder. Case file number 3278, written by Kim Reck. Nights in the Mill House. I was in 7th grade, and we'd just moved into a mill-town house. One of those houses built by a dam in a mill that used to house the families of mill workers. The upstairs area always gave me an eerie feeling, but I shrugged it off as the discomfort of living in a new place. From the beginning, I had trouble sleeping and was jolted awake in the middle of the night repeatedly for no apparent reason. Then, I started hearing the thumping. It started as occasional, soft thumps, seemingly coming from the attic. I had my dad check it out to ease my mind, but he found no explanation. Fast forward a few weeks. The occasional thumping was becoming louder, and I continued to wake up in the middle of the night. One night I was jolted awake again, but this time I recalled hearing a loud bang, accompanied by the sound of breaking plastic. I looked to my window across the room, and the blinds had been completely torn and were in disarray. My door was closed, the windows were closed, and the house was locked up tight. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. I made it downstairs pretty quickly, and the sound woke my parents, so they went upstairs to check it out. They found no cause or explanation. I slept on the couch downstairs until we moved shortly afterwards. Case file number 3279, written by the G-Rim. Through the snow, through me. My friend's mother is the typical Canadian mother. A heart of gold, but not one to tell fishing stories. One night I was up late shooting the crap with his whole family, and he alluded to "that one story, Mom." She seemed visibly sobered, but she went on to tell us a story from when she was a teenager. It was late at night, and it was snowing. So summer, for all I know, as it was Canada. And it was a storm for the ages. She said that visibility was at most 10 to 15 feet. As she approached a stop sign, likely driving too fast for the conditions, she noticed a car driving perpendicular to her driving too fast as well. There was no time to react. She slammed on her brakes, and when the cars were but inches apart, she closed her eyes and braced for impact. Impact that never came. The next thing she knew, she was at a standstill on the other side of the intersection. She got out of the car to gather her bearings, and she noticed the other car was stopped as well. The driver had his hands over his face and was shaking. She approached him and asked something to the effect of, "What the fluck just happened?" He looks up at her crying and shaking as well, and asked if she was kidding, and when pressed said, "Right when our cars collided, instead of impact, your car passed through me. I felt a chill as I saw your body pass through my own." Obviously, she refused to believe him, but that was a story he was sticking to, and obviously her eyes were closed, so she had to go off his account. The important thing to stress is how much of a straight shooter this guy's mom is. Doesn't tell stories, doesn't bullcrap, and roughly 40 years later, even telling the story still affects her. So another case that makes you think, okay, quantum immortality. But the description of the other person, seeing you phase through with the car, with your body, everything. This could be one of those instances where the memory's psychological defense mechanism creates a memory of an experience that is otherwise inexplicable. And I mean, the created memory is still inexplicable, but it makes some sense, I guess. You just somehow phase through each other. It could still be quantum immortality, and you're in this new universe where the other person's defense mechanism psychologically created this false memory of phasing through, but really you just grazed each other. But it is weird. I mean, it's not really a defense mechanism, because if you're in a new universe and you didn't crash into each other, well, why do you need a fake memory for that? So I don't know. Was it not quantum immortality and you simply phased through it? Maybe a guardian angel event, and the guardian could cause the matter to phase through each other? Huh. That is true God mode level developer tools. Case file number 3280, written by Nathan Paul Young, The Radiant Stranger. When I was 16 or so, I stayed the night at my best friend's house. I was always rather impressed with the size of his house, even once becoming lost downstairs. His family was large, and they tended to have guests a lot, so there were areas of his house that just plain never saw people. On this particular night, we were skirting some of those areas when things began to get strange. So, we're in his basement, he's playing some guitar, and I'm on my computer. He has to pee, so he leaves the largest room of the basement and enters an area of the house, also in the basement, that no one usually enters. It's mostly just used for storage, but it has the closest toilet, and he's a lazy motherfricker, so he chooses to go there. He comes back after the usual amount of time and asks me to come listen to something. I get to just outside the bathroom and we stop. Footsteps? From the room we're in, and the direction of the noise is moving as if from a person walking around the room. Also, the room is carpeted and the sound is as if on a hardwood floor. Also, we're the only ones home. So whatever, we're like, well, that's spooky, and decided to ignore it and scare it away with loud music and boisterous laughter. Essentially, just trying not to worry too much about it. After a time, we're like, it's 11 p.m. The weather is marvelous. Let's go for a walk outside. The night air will be fantastic. And off we go. Now, his house has a massive 50-ish acre common area in the back, a row of houses on one side and a semicircle of forest on the other. We trudge on out into the tall grass, and I've just basically been walking and talking about normal stuff for a couple of minutes when we both freeze. Do you see that? The white thing? Yeah, dude. Yes. What do we do? Back up slowly. We have to get away. Got it. And we start backing up. The whole time we're staring at this radiant white body, standing or hovering a few feet off the ground. It looks like it has limbs and a tail, but it has very little detail and almost appears orb-like. After a few seconds of deliberate reverse retreat, my friend turns around and as if in unison, the white thing vanishes. I turn around too, as when I do, I see it easily 100 feet away standing amongst a completely different set of trees in that same forest. At this point I say, "Fluck it, we've got to get back," and we both just take off towards the well-lit front of this house. As we arrive, we start feeling giddy from the adrenaline, and are just like, well, that was madness. Glad it's over. We start ambling into the street, and as we get a few feet from the only 3 streetlights in view, they all turn off at once. We had the single largest nope moment ever. Took off inside, locked all the doors and windows, turned on all the lights, and made sure the flucking television was on in all the rooms to avoid anyone hearing anything they shouldn't. The strangest thing, however, was the clock showed 1:43 a.m. We had only been outside for maybe 10 minutes, and yet nearly 2.5 hours had passed. This was the most terrifying part of the whole ordeal. Case file number 3281, written by Sugar Consistent 4947. When laundry gets weird. Last year, I bought my daughter some back-to-school essentials for kindergarten. I had bought her some ankle socks, and they were a pack of 8. All different colors, with positive written on the inside rim of the sock, the part that goes around the ankle. For example, some say, "Superstar, I'm awesome, strong," a smiley face, etc. So now, it's a year later, she doesn't wear them as much as she's grown, and it's too cold right now. But she wore a pair the other day, and when I was doing laundry, I came across the pair she wore. It was a dark purple set with the word strong on them. I folded them together and finished the laundry. At the end of the pile was another dark purple ankle sock that said strong. So now there are 3 of the same sock, and I cannot, for the life of me, figure this out. There was never more than 1 pair of each of the matching socks. I'm tripping. Case file number 3282, written by Sticky Note. The girl none of us should have seen. I was 15 and on a trip to Montana with my family. One night, we stayed at a hotel that backed to an open field. It was really beautiful, so I left the curtains open and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up for some reason and looked out of the window, only to see a young girl dressed like a pioneer looking right at me from a distance. I freaked out and shut the curtain, convinced that I was dreaming or imagining things. Then my brother, who was sleeping in the room with me, sat up and said, "Did you see that thing too? It's been staring at me for 10 minutes. We were both terrified and stayed awake the rest of the night watching infomercials. Then next morning we met our parents for breakfast, and my mom mentioned that she had a hard time sleeping and mentioned seeing the same girl out of her window around the same time we did. The crazy thing is that our rooms were not neighboring, but on opposite corners of the building. Case file number 3283, written by Kekembas17, Dinner with the Dead. I went on a ghost tour some years ago. I'm not big into that whole thing, but my girlfriend was, so I entertained the idea. We stopped at a building that was a hotel of sorts back in the early 1900s, until a fire broke out and killed a bunch of people. It was late, and I ended up staying over at my girlfriend's house. I woke up in a sweat, and all I could remember was being back in that small town and peering through the windows of that abandoned hotel. I saw a family sitting at an old table. They were having a conversation with a little girl sitting there beside the mother. She looked over at me and smiled. She then got up and walked up to the window. She put her hand on the glass and whispered, "Masterson." She smiled and walked back to the table. At that moment, I woke up, freaking the fuck out. I passed out sometime after that, and when I woke back up, I immediately called my girlfriend's aunt, who was in charge of giving the ghost tours. I told her everything, and later that week, she had pulled the names of those burned in the buildings. There was a family with a little girl traveling through from New York City. Last name, Masterson. Ever since that time, I've become a huge scaredy cat when it comes to anything creepy or scary. I have also taken into consideration that the aunt could have just been fucking with me, but I doubt it. Case file number 3284, written by Just the Wife, Behind the Drywall. Several things that all centered around my laundry room. When my husband and I were dating, he was home alone talking to me on his cell. All of a sudden, he got quiet and said that he was doing laundry and came down to put it in the dryer, and the top of the washer lid was open. The washer won't run at all with the lid open, so he was a little confused. As he was explaining this to me, I heard the line crackle and go dead. I thought it was weird for a cell phone to crackle like a landline, but didn't think too much of it. He called back and said every hair on his body was standing up. He heard a laugh and the phone went dead. He was home alone. About a month after I moved in, I came home alone at night for the first time. All of the windows facing the street were completely dark, and I was thinking how I should have left the light on. I came in and went straight upstairs. We have a split level, and laid down on the couch and fell asleep. When my husband came home about an hour later, he came upstairs to wake me up, and we went downstairs. The light from the laundry room was on and shining into the hallway. I asked why he had turned the light on, and he said he didn't, that he hadn't even been downstairs. I know there was not a light on because that room's window is clearly visible from the front of the house. Huge picture window. One night, we babysat our 1-year-old niece, and every time she fell asleep, as soon as we took her downstairs to sleep, our room is down the hall from the laundry room, she would wake up screaming instantly. I finally had to call her parents to come get her because I thought she was sick. As we are retelling this story to my husband's family, they jokingly said it was probably the ghost that we've told them stories about because babies can sense ghosts. Being funny, my husband says that he'll go test the theory. He took the baby downstairs and came right back up white as a sheet. He said he opened the laundry room door and she reached her hand out, said, "Hi," and waved to the wall. Another time, we bought a crap ton of meat and put it in the freezer in that room. A few days later, the plug was pulled out just enough to stop the current, and this isn't a normal plug. It's a rubber extension plug that you have to work back and forth to get a plug into or out of. After all this, one night, my sister-in-law said, "I wonder if it has anything to do with that ring we found." I asked what they were talking about, and she said when my husband bought the house, they were renovating the laundry room and busted up some drywall, and a man's wedding ring fell out of the wall. I couldn't believe it. I asked my husband where it was now, and he said in his nightstand. He had thrown it in there and forgot about it. I made them both go back downstairs, apologize or whatever, and put the ring back on the wall. They did, and nothing has happened since. Case file number 3285, written by Taheka. What waited beyond the porch? I grew up in a raised ranch house. It was built into a hill and looked like 1 story from the front, 2 stories from the back. We had a nice screened-in porch and would often go out there in the evenings, late, and smoke. I slept in a room downstairs immediately underneath my parents' room. So, one night, I'd been playing video games and decided to have a couple of smokes and some wind-down time before bed. It must have been about 2 a.m. or so. All of the lights were off in the house except for a dim light in my room, and I went to go outside and literally, as my hand touched the door, suddenly the stairway light going upstairs over my left shoulder went on. Totally freaks me out, so I stop and say loudly, "Mom? Mom?" Hear nothing and decide to go upstairs and check it out. Walk upstairs, nothing. The parents' door closed. Dog sleeping on floor. No one there. Okay, whatever. The house was built in the 50s. Maybe it was a wiring thing or something. Head back downstairs, decide to leave the stairway light on, and still go for a smoke. Head to the door, touch the handle. Light goes off. I kid you not. I freeze. At this point, I am seriously freaking the hell out. A voice suddenly appears in my head, and all I hear is, "Something does not want you to go outside." I make sure all the doors are locked, head to my bedroom, and lie down in the darkness for hours. When dawn comes, I finally fall asleep. Still wonder to this day what would have happened if I went outside. Case file number 3286, written by M.S. Skippa. Where no footprints could exist. A few years ago, I was night fishing with my uncle at a spot we've been to many times. Around midnight, we noticed a figure on the opposite bank of the river, probably 50 or so meters away. That side is basically unreachable, no paths, thick vegetation, completely remote. At first, it looked like a man walking along the bank. Even with only a quarter moon, we could see him clearly. I even shined my flashlight on him and lit him up like daylight. Definitely looked human. He walked a few dozen meters and then stepped behind a tree, and never came back out. It also did not respond when we called out to it. We stayed for another 3 to 4 hours, keeping an eye on that exact spot, and nothing. I went back during the day to check, and there's literally no way anyone could have vanished like that. Flat terrain, no dips, no hiding spots. There were no signs of animals, and both of us saw him move like a normal person. To this day, I have no idea how someone or something could just disappear like that. I spoke about it with my uncle a couple times. He has passed since then. I still cannot shake the feeling we both had. It felt so eerie. I don't know what could be worse. If it was a real person, I think that honestly would only make it worse. At the end of the night, my uncle even asked if we should check it out. I declined and urged him to not go back and check, and he agreed. The entire night, both of our minds were only focused on that person, and our eyes were peeled on that tree. Case file number 3287, written by Anonymous. The Porcelain Soul. My grandmother had this creepy porcelain clown doll that she kept in the excess bedroom, where there was a bunk bed my sister and I shared. It had a beanbag for a body and a skinny face, a little cone hat, and a really disturbing smile. When my sister Jenny and I were little, I was probably 10 or 11 and she was about 8. Our imaginations were running wild whenever we visited and swore that something was staring at us while we slept. So we decided to throw it out. My grandma lived in an apartment complex with a dumpster assigned to each block of apartments. There must have been about a dozen dumpsters sprinkled throughout the rather large complex. Jenny and I decided that if we threw it in the dumpster closest to our apartment, there was a chance our grandma would find it and get angry. So we walked pretty far, out of paranoia, and shimmied up the side of the dumpster to hide it under another garbage bag. That was that, so we thought. We visited a few weekends later, and there it was, propped up on the shelf, opposite the bed, in the same exact place staring at us. I remember we both burst into hysterics and asked my grandma where she found that doll, and she looked puzzled. She said something about, "The clown doll? The one your Aunt Mary gave to me. What about it?" So jump forward years later. My sister and I were telling that story at a party because we both remembered it so vividly. I keep it stored somewhere in the back of my mind and tell my friend Tony about it while we're chatting online. He freaked out, went full-blown caps lock on me, and asked me to describe it. I started with skinny porcelain face. He finished with beanbag body? Yep. Single tear? Yep. Cone hat? Yep. He called me immediately and recounted the time that when he was a child, he had a clown doll like that his parents bought him on vacation, and he chucked it into the ocean because he hated it so much. Years later, sometime in his late teens or early 20s, he found the identical doll in an old box in the attic. So this story resonates with me just for the creepiness of dolls. My grandmother had a lot of dolls too. I think most grandmothers have these weird dolls. I don't know what's going on. Every grandmother's house is pretty much the same growing up, right? We all had that experience with the really loud clock, the analog clock, dipping back and forth, and the fridge was super loud, and the blankets were musty, and everything was quiet and loud at the same time, and it was just weird. Don't know what's going on with grandmas. But yeah, they also all had these dolls. Some were creepier than others. My grandma's dolls weren't like creepy clowns or anything with weird smiles. I get the fear of these dolls. But them coming back. Is there a spirit attached to them, pulling them back to the place they're bound to? Maybe? Doesn't make it any less creepy, does it? Now time for the jokes of the day. A girl told me she wanted to just be friends. I said, "Can we be friends with benefits?" She said, "So, you just want to fool around?" I said, "No, I want you to add me to your health insurance." Indeed, benefits. Today, the US Mint will officially mint the last US penny and will no longer produce them in the future. This makes no sense. Scientists got bored after watching the Earth turn for 24 hours, so they called it a day. Last night, a man was hit over the head with a violin, then a clarinet, and finally, a French horn. Police say it was an orchestrated attack. An 80-year-old man with a 30-year-old wife went to his doctor to tell him the good news. His wife of 2 months was already pregnant. The doctor stared at him and said, "Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine likes going bear hunting. One day, after following a big one for miles, he realized that he had made a mistake. Instead of his hunting rifle, he accidentally packed his umbrella. So with no other choice, he raised his umbrella to the beast and pulled the handle. And bam, the bear was dead. That's impossible. Somebody else must have shot it from hiding." The doctor said, "I'm glad we understand each other." Whoops. Dave was flabbergasted. Video up here. YouTube thinks you'll like it. Check it out. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. See you next time.